Now, I'm a big believer in doing what we say we're going to do. And what I said was that we would start at 11 a.m. So let's crack on. Welcome, everybody, to our webinar on virtual delivery. And this is about virtual delivery and virtual collaboration. So welcome. And we were just having a conversation on the whiteboard about what brings you here today. Just to involve as many people as possible in that, I've just launched a poll on the screen, which I hope you can see. Now, I've had some technical challenges with this in the past, and one of the joys and challenges of remote working is coping with the moments when things don't quite work as you hoped. But it looks like I can see some comments coming in already, some responses coming in already. So it looks like this one is working, which is great. So I'll just give you a few seconds to look at the question, look at the responses, and pick the ones that most resonate for you. And I'm really hoping that on this webinar, this is a rerun of a webinar I did a couple of weeks ago, and I'm doing it in partnership with G1st LEP, so that's Gloucester Local Enterprise Partnership and the Gloucestershire Growth Hubs. And thanks to Yesim for working with us on that. This is a rerun because the first one was so popular, so we wanted to give as many people as possible the opportunity to experience the webinar. I want this one to be even more collaborative than the last one, so there's going to be many more opportunities to share your experiences from the last few weeks, because I know a lot of us have been working from home for some time now, and I think it'll be great to share our best practice and learning. So as we go through the webinar, if you have any insights that build on what I'm saying, then please do share them in the chat box, and I'll be sure to include those as we go through. So I think a lot of people have had a chance to respond to the poll, so I shall end it and share the results. And I can see that quite a few of us work in L&D, and we're thinking about how to deliver virtual training. We're definitely going to touch on that, and been thinking about how to do virtual working for a long time. Well, now is our opportunity to explore that. And of course, a lot of us are worried about the impact of COVID-19 on our ways of working. And I think what we've seen over the last few weeks is that it has had a dramatic impact and is going to continue to do so. And of course, a couple of us have been told not to come into the office. So we simply need to get better at virtual working. And a couple of us are thinking about how we can stay connected virtually with our customers. Well, I really hope that you get something from the webinar today to respond to what you're looking for. And feel free to throw any insights or indeed any questions into the chat box. If I can't answer the questions myself, I'll throw them out to the rest of the people in the group. You know, we're in this together, and I don't claim to be any more of an expert than anyone else, except that this is something I've been doing for a little while, and you know, more than just during the last few weeks. So welcome, and thank you for engaging with the poll. Now, as we know, the world has had a profound shock, and actually, anyone who attended the last webinar I did will have seen that this slide has changed, because I had a little video of a panda sneezing, because one of the practices that I think is important is humor when it comes to sharing virtually and holding webinars to keep people engaged. But actually, over the last few weeks, I think that the situation has become so profound and so world-changing, and also, you know, there's also the increasingly extreme health impact that we're seeing, that I no longer felt it was appropriate to make light of the situation. So if anyone wants to see a video of a panda sneezing, just go to YouTube and enjoy that. It's about 15 seconds of lightheartedness. This slide is simply here to say, let's stick to the advice, stay home and stay safe. And of course, we all know what the shock that I'm talking about is. But the profound impact that has had, I suggest, couldn't have come soon enough, because the cost of business travel per employee in the UK on average is £750. And a lot of the people on this webinar, I would imagine, if you're trainers, if you work in consulting, I imagine that the cost of business travel to you and to your clients is significantly higher than that. So of course, this is an average across all employees in the UK. The £750 to UK PLC is a significant, huge cost to the economy. And not only that, but commuters spend an average of £1,750 per year to get to work. And of course, if people are dialing in from London, you may find that I imagine your commuting cost is significantly higher than that. And of course, some of us don't spend anything like that. So again, it's an average, but it's a significant amount of money that is spent, and that is a cost to our economy that perhaps doesn't necessarily need to happen. I can see that Zach has commented that his was over £10,000 per year. That's really significant. But perhaps the most significant impact of business travel isn't the cost, it's actually the environmental impact. So the graph that I've shared here is a major professional services firm that has been seeking to reduce its carbon footprint. It's a global firm, so its carbon footprint is significant. And over the last, 13 years, they've managed to reduce it by almost half overall, which is really significant. And that's the top line, the line that's going steadily down. And you can see that there's a dip in 2010, clearly linked to the financial crash. But the bottom line is the business travel carbon footprint. And you can see that that has remained basically stagnant apart from the dip in 2010, and actually increased again considerably after that, even as the carbon emissions of the total business were reducing. And that is almost like an oversight. And I think that oversight that companies have made about the cost of business travel, whether it's commuting, whether it's traveling to meetings or for conferences or for training, that has to be recognized as a significant impact on our environment. And many of us will have seen the incredible maps that have been shown over the last few weeks of the reduction in emissions over cities that are in lockdown. I think this is going to, I sincerely hope that this is going to change the views and the attitudes of people in society towards business travel. And of course, that's going to have a profound impact on those of us who work in industries which have traditionally sought to hold face-to-face meetings or face-to-face training. So we need to really think about our impact on society and on the environment going forward. And of course, that is why we need to get serious about thinking about virtual collaboration and virtual delivery. So without further ado, let's get into the meat of it. Well, I say without further ado, but of course, something we've all seen.
Scandals happen all the time. The question is, how do democracies respond to those scandals?
And what will it mean for the wider region? I think one of your children has just walked in. I mean, shifting sands in the region. Do you think relations with the North may change?
I would be surprised if they do. Pardon me.
That's right, carry on.
My apologies.
I mean, I think he dealt with that perfectly. Yes, if it's just said that's me every day now. Has anyone else got moments when things like that have happened? Mine is usually dogs trying to jump into my lap or barking because a delivery person has just arrived. But I think, it's important to recognize that moments like that are going to happen, and it's important to be lighthearted about them. So whether you're on a client call, whether you're on a team session, I think it's really important.
Scandals happen all the time. The question is, how do
I need to work out how on earth I stop that. There you go. I think it's really important that we are prepared for those moments of interruption, those moments that are actually showing that we're human. We've got a profound opportunity actually to become closer together, even in this time of isolation. We've got this incredible opportunity to get to know each other better. I mean, this is one of the rooms in my house, and I've had people admiring my wallpaper. Feel free to comment. I've been holding calls in different rooms in the house to give people variety as I've been having meetings with clients and my team. But anyway, that was just, I told you humor is important, and I hope that gave you a little chuckle this morning. So what we're going to cover today, the challenges of virtual working, and I'd love to get your perspectives on those. So put your thinking caps on now about what are some of the challenges that you've maybe experienced, some of the challenges that you can imagine experiencing over the coming weeks and months. We'll dig into some of the tools that we at the Innovation Beehive have been using with our team and with our clients. We'll then think about how you set up for success using those tools, because it's not just about putting the tools in place, it's also about working out how to use them effectively. And then I'll just share some next steps that you can take if you wish to. So you should have all found the chat box by now, and I can see that some people have been commenting away, which is great. But what are some of the big challenges that you can see in virtual working for you and your organization? And whether you're a trainer, so you might be thinking about the specifics of that, that's great. If you're thinking about how you work with your team or how you engage with your clients, and when you write the challenge, if you can contextualize it with what you do, so that we can keep it in context, that would be really helpful. So feel free to start typing some comments into the chat box now. Oh, and I can see, Helen, I saw that the BBC revisited that family, and I think it's great. This guy's becoming a bit of a key person of influence at the moment, I think. And Zach has said, just in terms of challenges, keeping people's attention is a challenge. He's a trainer and he's used to full day sessions, which are not possible now virtually. Absolutely, Zach. And Danny has said, I see it more as an opportunity as opposed to a challenge. Great, Danny. Well, we're going to get into the opportunity shortly. Are you saying that you see things that other people might see as challenges as opportunities? Maybe you could share a few of those. And Jamie has said, fear of technology. Absolutely. Is that your own fear, Jamie, or is that other people's fear, people who you're trying to engage? And we've got Jennifer has said, biggest challenge is using technology. Recently moved to Surface Pro and Microsoft Teams. Technology is not my ability. So actually, interestingly, you've moved to a really good piece of kit there with Microsoft Teams, Jennifer. And it's something that I've started using recently. And it's absolutely phenomenal. It's incredibly agile in what it can do. So it's one of those things that you spend a bit of time investing in learning how to use it, and you'll fly with it. Engagement and keeping things moving, Amanda has said, yeah, absolutely. I was actually talking to someone yesterday, and their senior leadership team had said that they're expecting productivity to fall to basically zero. Now, personally, I wouldn't stand for that, and I'd be thinking, what can I do to improve productivity? But I totally understand people are in unprecedented times, and for many, many reasons, people are going to struggle with this beyond just using technology. And colleagues who don't contribute, that's interesting, yeah. So Helen has described it as like pulling teeth sometimes. And hopefully you'll get some ideas from today, which will help you with that. And Marco has said, does everyone have the right broadband? Remote systems have not been checked. So Marco, are you coming at this from a sort of corporate, like, and there's issues around security, or is it simply that some people have slow internet? And I can see that Sue has said, the feeling of being present in the room with a group of people, engaging them when they're all on their own, absolutely. And I'm going to share some ideas on that, on how you can use the right resource and the right tech at the right time to try and keep that level of presence and engagement. Yeah, great. And keeping a sense of presence. And then making sure everyone has an opportunity to contribute and it's not dominated by the loudest voice. Absolutely. And I hope, even though we're on a webinar today, so we can only really have one voice, I hope you all feel that you're able to contribute as we go. And if there's ways of ensuring that can happen, and again, it comes down to using the right tech in the right context, but also in terms of setting the right behaviors. Marco talked about ergonomic workspace. So Marco, can you just dig into that a little bit more? Is that to do with the place that you're actually working, from where you're working, or am I misunderstanding that a little bit? And Danny has said the role of facilitator is key. And Marco, yeah, absolutely. Not really set up to work from home. Absolutely. Yeah, I'm using a dining table at the moment as well, Marco. I'm very, very, very aware of my posture. Yeah, okay, that's a good one about workspace, actually. Lovely. Yeah, no adjustable chair. Exactly. Yeah. So thank you. That's great. So we've got quite a few challenges here. I think I've captured just about everything that came through. Actually, expectation management. Who said that? Helen said expectation management. I think that's a really good one, and I think that is something that is incredibly important from the off, but it's also something to come back to as you go through. As you continue working together. So thanks everyone, that's really good. Let's head back to the slides. So when I was pulling this together, I chatted this deck together. I chatted to my team and to a few of my clients, and some of the things that I heard I came up when we were just talking. We don't know what tools to use. We won't be communicating as effectively, and people just won't engage. And I think these are the sort of core challenges that I'm hoping we can cover today. And I see, right, and also just one other point that's come through is people working at home with their partner and their children. It's okay if they're working quietly, but it can be more problematic with calls. Absolutely, and again, as that video demonstrated, sometimes these interruptions will happen, and again, there's probably a piece around expectation management, around mindset that of everybody who's involved in the call that will help with that. So yeah, the big three challenges that we're going to dig into are: we don't know what tools to use, we won't be communicating as effectively potentially, and people just won't engage. I think we can add productivity to that as well. People won't be productive, or there's a fear that people won't be productive. So I think what we're covering for the next 30 minutes or so will help with these challenges, as well as the ones that came up on the whiteboard just now. So some of the tools for virtual collaboration and virtual delivery. I've organized these into three categories because I think it's important to think about the utility that or the use that you're making of the tool. So, it can be quite overwhelming when you go online and you Google tools for virtual delivery or tools for virtual engagement. It can be quite overwhelming because there's so much out there. And if you think of it in terms of segments, so what do I need this for? What problem am I trying to solve? It can be really helpful. So keeping connected, I've thrown three up here, and I'm being sort of agnostic in terms of the specific brands or the specific resources that are available, because you can find lots online, and there are pros and cons to each of them. I've been using Teams and I've been using Zoom, and there's a lot of similar functionality. There's also some different functionality. And there's also some limitations to both. So whatever works for you in terms of virtual meetings and for your colleagues, and also for example, if you're a consultant or a trainer, being agile in the technology that you use. So, if one of your clients uses Office 365, use that with them, because that means that they've got easier ways of accessing than having to register for a Zoom webinar, for example. And if your clients use Skype, then use Skype. Use what works for them, and use what works for your team. Instant messenger apps like WhatsApp. So our team stay connected via WhatsApp, and we're also building a community of people who are virtually working. Some of you may have joined from that today, and I'll be sharing a link at the end so that you can join it as well. And that's just a place where people are able to share best practice hints and tips, and that's on WhatsApp. But of course, there are many other instant messenger app platforms as well. Again, use the one that works for you, whether it's Slack, whether it's Facebook Messenger, whether it's in the Office 365 suite, whatever works for you. And then webinars are a great way of keeping connected. Slightly different in that they are more, as you can see from this, they're more broadcast. There's opportunities to engage through whiteboards, through chat, through polls, but there's not so much opportunity to hold conversations, so they're generally better for maybe bigger groups. And get creative in how you use them, and be flexible in the approach. I'm going to talk a little later about the idea of hacking the tools at your disposal. So you'll see life hacks online, and sort of thinking creatively about how you can use these tools. So that's about keeping connected, keeping engaged. So this is keeping engaged for yourself, but also keeping your team engaged, keeping your clients engaged, keeping your learners engaged. And there's so much amazing resource out there. We turn all of these webinars that we record into videos that go on our YouTube page. We share podcasts with our team, with the virtual working party group. And we just go out there and find it. And the key thing when you come to share these resources with your team to build engagement is not just to share it, but to share it with your comment. So why you've shared it, so that people understand and have a sense of purpose to actually engaging with the content that you've shared. So make it relevant and say why it's relevant. But also, I always try to ask a question to keep it, or to start a conversation, or to keep a conversation flowing. And that applies to videos, podcasts, articles, etc. Now, for those of us who are trainers and thinking about how we can move to digital delivery, learning management systems are so powerful because it's not just about guiding people through a course. And here's one of the life hacks that I want to talk about. So Zach, our capability director, who's on the webinar here, has been working extremely hard to explore the functionality of our learning management system. And he's uncovered ways of creating a sort of repository for useful content. So people can join us for a Zoom call, and we can give them some virtual training. And then they can be directed to the learning management system to access, PDF resources, to access online survey quizzes and the like, to access virtual content like videos and podcasts, to respond to questions, to open chats. So it becomes a much more dynamic space and a much more flexible space than we might have traditionally thought of learning management systems being. And again, there are so many out there that I'm not going to recommend one over the other, because they all have pretty much the same functionality, but it's about finding the one that works for you or the one that works for your clients. But the key thing I want you to take from that is hack the system, in the sense of a life hack, in the sense of making it do what you want it to do, even if you're not asking it to do exactly what it was designed for. I mean, people have been doing this with PowerPoint for years, using it for all sorts of things other than presentations. So do that with the technology that's available to you. It's probably the biggest piece of advice that I would say take from this is get creative in how you use the resources that are available. And then finally, keeping productive. So there's collaboration platforms like Office 365 or Dropbox, where you can work collaboratively on documents in real time without worrying about version control, which has always been a big concern in organizations. When you use Office 365 or Dropbox, you've got means of ensuring that you don't accidentally delete someone else's work or duplicate it. It's all saved there for posterity. Each version is available to reload backup. So you can get really flexible in the way that you work collaboratively. And actually, if you do use Microsoft Teams, you can work in real time on the documents whilst in a meeting, or you can share screen on Zoom if that's the preferred platform, and you can really collaborate and come together. And as you saw, using a whiteboard earlier, when you have it in a meeting, certainly you find people can collaborate together on that whiteboard, and you can work really creatively together on using these collaboration platforms. So highly recommend thinking about how you can hold one of those. If you're a consultant, for example, think about how you can use those with your clients. Think about how you can use them with learners to maybe put some of the learning into practice. If you use templates in your workshops, think about how you can move them online so that people can break out into smaller groups and work creatively together. And speaking of breakouts, I can see that Helen has just mentioned the Zoom breakout group functionality. It's an absolutely amazing feature. I completely agree. And it's something that I would encourage you to experiment with. Start off small, because it can become quite unwieldy to have a large group of people splitting off into breakouts. There's always a risk that you're going to lose control, or that people won't do what you're expecting them to do. But absolutely, get creative and get experimental with all of the functionality that's available to you. Incidentally, breakout groups can only be done, as far as I can tell, at least in meetings rather than in webinars. So you can have a maximum of 100 people in a meeting, or a maximum of 500 in a webinar. So that's to an extent dependent on on the number of people that you're working with, etc., and what you're looking to get from it. So digital creativity tools. That's a real catch-all term for a whole lot of potential resources and tools that are available to you. We're talking things like storyboarding apps, mind mapping tools, design apps like Canva. There are so many out there. And, if you just go online and noodle around a little bit, look for digital creativity tools, or, if you've got a particular challenge, look for tools that can help you with that. Because in an age of apps, that we've lived in for a number of years, there's a very good chance that somebody will have solved your problem for you. And then online surveys. Now I've put this in because these are something that we use a lot in our organization. We use them for evaluating training, of course, but we also use them to work with our clients to come up with new ideas and to test ideas, to judge ideas that have come up, because at our core, we're an innovation company. And you can get really creative with online surveys. You can use images, you can make them fun, you can change the way that people engage with them, change the type of questioning that you're asking. And the other thing that I always try to do with online surveys is sort of gamify them a little bit. So, what are people working towards? And when they get to the end of it, I always go back to thinking about keeping people engaged. So when people get to the end of a survey, I reward them with, a video or a podcast or an article, which they are then able to enjoy as a sort of thank you for completing the survey. I seem to have lost the ability to move my slides forward now because I tried to annotate my deck. So again, get used to the technology in real time. Why not? There we go. Okay, now I need to work out how I remove those. There you go. Oh, joy. Yeah, online surveys, digital creativity tools, and collaboration platforms. These are all ways of staying productive. Now, I'd love to know from you, of the ones I've shared, what tools have you used? And I'm going to just launch a new poll. Here we go. So you can tick all that apply. And as you're thinking about this, please feel free to share any other tools that you've used, any specific tools that you've used within the titles, the headings, if you like, that I've just shared. And I can see some coming in now. That's great. And any hints and tips that you may have for people. I can see Helen has shared about the Zoom breakout groups. What other tips do you have for people on how you can use these tools effectively? Great, looks like everyone's engaging really well with this poll. And I think the results aren't going to be too surprising for people. And if you do have any hints and tips, just pop them in the chat box. Great, it looks like most of you have engaged with the poll, so I'm going to end it now and share the results. You can see that just about all of us have used virtual meetings before, which is great. Most of us have used or presumably been on webinars. Most of us use instant messenger apps. A lot of us use video, podcasts, etc. Yeah, but half of us use learning management systems. So that's good. And I'd really encourage you to get creative about how you use those and think creatively about it. Same with collaboration platforms. Slightly fewer people using those. Like if you want any hints and tips on that or how to get started on it, feel free to ping me an email and I'd be more than happy to jump on a call with you to talk through how we do that. And also to talk through the fears and the concerns about it, because frankly, speaking openly, we've had real concerns about moving from one to another. We're planning to move to Office 365, and we've been planning to do that for about 8 months. Even a small company like us, we have fear of digital change. And I think whatever organization you work in, however large or small, there is going to be that fear of change. And I think when we get into the next section, we'll talk a little bit about that. Marco has just said, picking up a phone. Yeah, absolutely. Do every time I've thought about these tools, I've thought I should just add the telephone to it. I think I'm going to do that. I need to create an icon for it. Marco, yeah, picking up a phone. And then online surveys, a lot of people use those. That's really good. Okay, excellent. And again, thinking about online surveys, again, if anyone wants bounce any ideas around about how to get creative with online surveys, feel free to reach out after the webinar. My contact details will be on the final slide. Great, thank you everyone. So heading into I think we might have another interruption coming our way.
Sí, la parte del CISAT ya quedó, ya solamente tenemos que registrar autonomía curricular y el área socioemocional de los niños, porque esa parte no está quedando bien. Perdón.
So possibly possibly not the best way of coping if you do find yourself interrupting someone else's Zoom call. Try and avoid walking into a door. But you know, there's something there's something quite there's quite a good learning in that, which is possibly when we are working from home, just make the other people in our household aware of what we're doing if we're doing something with a client or indeed presenting live on television. I promise that's the last interruption, I hope, I think. So we've thought about the tools, so now let's think about how we set up for success. Because you wouldn't let someone drive a car without making sure they'd had lessons first. And yet so often we just give people digital tools and think that they know how to use them. And I think from some of the comments around the challenges that people were talking about at the beginning of the webinar, I think that's something that we on this webinar are acutely aware of. And I think it's something that organizations up and down the country are becoming aware of, that, you know, you can't just expect people to suddenly know how to use this technology, however intuitive it may be. And we also, you know, we all need to keep motivated at the gym, and some of us are able to motivate ourselves. Others of us need someone to help keep us motivated, like a personal trainer or going with a gym buddy. And of course, none of us are going to the gym at the moment, so I think a lot of us are probably keeping Joe Wicks on speed dial, or at least joining him every morning for his daily workout. I say us, but I can't count myself in that group, I'm afraid. I just go for a 30-minute walk with my dogs every day, so they're the ones that keep me motivated. And we also need to think about new contexts and new ways, the new contexts and the new ways of working that we're operating in, because we need to avoid the potential awkward moments and the conflicts that might arise if we don't think hard about what our contexts mean. So just a quick clip to demonstrate that point.
This realm, this England, to the Queen.
So, of course, the learning there is check the conventions before you get up to make a speech, and know what to do if the band starts playing the national anthem during your speech. Because, of course, nobody is going to pick up their glass whilst the national anthem is being played. But the other learning that I take from that video is the beautiful response from the Queen. She, as soon as the national anthem was over, she then recovered the situation for the president. I don't know if you caught it because the sound wasn't very high, but she said, "It's very kind, thank you." And I thought that is sort of a beautiful recovery, and kind of our role as people who are either convening virtual teams, leading virtual teams, or coordinating training and trying to facilitate training in these uncertain times is to make people at ease, either ideally by setting the ground rules before we start, or if something goes wrong, as it did there, trying to make it as easy for other people to make it right and to feel at ease again when something has gone wrong. Because we're actually operating in a world of new etiquette, and there are different kinds of awkwardness that can emerge that probably wouldn't have occurred in an in-room face-to-face meeting or in-room face-to-face training. So just some tips from me on the sort of things the sort of skills that people are going to need in this new world. So they're going to need simple how-tos. So, you know, how to use videos, how-to videos, simple user guides, and potentially podcasts on how to do these things. So, you know, it's simple things like at the beginning of this webinar, I put up a whiteboard with a question on it, and I asked you to write your comments in the comment box. That was one, because I wanted to get you engaged from the get-go, and because I wanted to know who was on and give you all a chance to say hello. But secondly, and probably more importantly from my perspective as the facilitator here, it was to make sure that as many of you as possible were able to access the tool that we were going to use, which was the chat box. And as many of you as possible who would be able to type onto the whiteboard if you wanted to, and if your technology enabled you to. So it's about doing these little things that can both signal intent in terms of engagement, but also give people an opportunity to practice the skills that they're going to need and practice using the tools that they need in a safe way, without worry or without fear of awkwardness or embarrassment. So the other thing to consider when it comes to using the tools is think about the user experience from end to end, and select tools that complement the user experience. So something that we did, and there's a webinar that we ran last week, which I'll share in the email follow-up to this. But what we did was we sat down and thought, okay, what are the touch points that we have in our online training? In our face-to-face training and in our face-to-face consulting and in our leadership development programs. What are all the touch points? What are all the learning outcomes that we're looking for, or what are all of the business outcomes that we're seeking to achieve? And then we thought, right, we're going to idea generate on this and think about ways that we can replicate not the experience as a whole, but replicate the learning outcome or the business outcome that we're seeking. And there's a whole webinar on that, so I won't go into any more detail on it now, but I would highly recommend that if you work in training, or if you work on generating business results for your organization or your clients, highly recommend you watch that webinar, because there's a really simple process that we take you through where you can identify ways of capturing and delivering learning outcomes and business outcomes in a virtual context by thinking creatively. And also think about the functionality and the usability of the tools at your disposal. That's why I've said a number of times, if your clients use Microsoft Teams, use Microsoft Teams. If your clients use Skype, use Skype. Because the functionality is basically similar, but it makes it as easy as possible for your stakeholders or your customers or your learners or your end users to engage with what you're trying to achieve. So secondly, what organizational specific ways of working do people need to know? So this comes back to the hacking the tools that I was talking about. Do people need to think in a particular way about specific functionality that will only work well if you've told them how it works? If so, make sure they know. So for example, we have a customer relationship management system, a CRM, and one of the things that we do is use tags in a very liberal way, possibly more liberal than we should. And there's probably a better way of doing what we do, but we've been doing it for over a year, and it's now the way we do things. So anyone from my team who uses the CRM system, they need to know what we use tags for and what we don't use tags for. So I've just got a little guide for them that just makes that clear, and I talk them through it before they start using the system, just so that they don't mess it up, and that they get it right, and they get it as right as they can, as quickly as they can. And be prepared for people to make little mistakes and for people to get a bit lost, and then be kind in your response to that, because people are dealing with a new thing that is unfamiliar to them. And then I think possibly the most important piece here is thinking about an ecosystem of tools. There's a couple of points in this. One is you're able to automate a huge amount these days. So you can have automated emails. You should have all received a reminder email an hour before this webinar to remind you to come. That was automated. I sometimes send personal emails, but I sometimes automate. It depends on, well, actually, I'll tell you why I no longer send personal emails, because it turns out that I didn't realize this, but you have a unique link, and I was just sending people my unique link, so people were actually struggling to get online. So that was an example of where personalization went wrong. But you can automate all sorts of processes within the tools that you have available. And again, it's about thinking through how they fit together. There's a brilliant tool called Zapier, which connects different programs together. Explore that and see if the tools that you're using connect together. Also plan ahead. So when I set up the virtual delivery WhatsApp group, which you'll be able to join later, there were a number of there was a plan that I had for content that I was going to share for the next week or so that I knew that there was going to be engagement. And now people are engaging themselves, so I need to share less stuff, which is absolutely brilliant. And Annabelle has just asked, where can we find the webinar you've just mentioned? So Annabelle, I'll be sending an email after the webinar later this afternoon, and I'll make sure that there's a link to it in that. Okay. Okay. Now thinking about how you'll motivate your people. So thinking about being the personal trainer in the gym, or being on the I've got a Couch to 5K app, which I sometimes use, and being that motivating voice. So this is all about using video. It's about using instant messenger apps. It's about using podcasts, and it's about using your learning management system. And the key thing that I want to say here is, as well as sharing content in a way that we talked about earlier around asking questions and sharing why you're sharing it, so why is it of value, The other thing to think about is how can you gamify? So for example, if you've got a team of say 10 people, or you've got a group of 15 learners, maybe there can be a prize for the person who shares the most relevant content, you know, over the course of a week. Maybe just a little prize, I don't know, a free ebook or something like that. So think about really, and you could even take that in more advanced. So if you manage a team, a really powerful way of keeping people motivated and engaged is around giving recognition. So one of our clients enabled anybody in the entire organization to give recognition to other people. But in order to encourage that, we set up a scheme whereby people would get a prize if they gave the most number of recognition cards in a month. But the key thing we did was that it was quantitative and qualitative. So you had to write on the recognition card why you were giving the recognition card. And it had to be a good reason, and it had to be an honest reason, a truthful reason. So there was you know, that way people couldn't really game it, because who's going to spend ages writing lots of fake recognition cards that don't mean anything to the person who's receiving it? It just wouldn't work. So we put a structure in place to enable the game to be played fair. So, you know, think through and just Google the word gamification, and you'll find so many ideas and so many resources on the web for that. And I just want to throw a question out, you know, thinking about the etiquette and the behaviors that, that people need to be mindful of. What are some of the ways of working and behaviors that you think people should be adopting and actually avoiding when working virtually? So I'm going to open up a whiteboard, and I'd love to get your comments coming through on the chat, and I'll post them onto the whiteboard. So what are some of the behaviors to adopt and to avoid when it comes to virtual working? Oh, and Helen has asked about the recognition card idea and what were the results. Helen, that was part of a much wider program of culture change at this organization. And it's a large organization of over 100,000 employees. And we saw a reduction in employee turnover of around 2%. And if you work in HR, you'll know that actually employee turnover is a significant cost because you need to hire new people. So you can just do some maths, and we saw an equivalent of a £9 million saving by having recognition cards, as well as other tools for improving engagement across the board. So Helen says, trying to get people to use webcams to be present. Absolutely. And actually, one of my learnings from the last few weeks is that webinar functionality is quite limited when it comes to Zoom in comparison to meetings. And I'm moving away from creating webinars and moving towards using meetings, precisely so that we can have video interaction and conversation as well as chat. Yeah. And then I accept that there will be times when we inadvertently speak over each other. Absolutely, and being accepting of that. Nice. All things going wrong. Yeah. Avoid multitasking. That is so important. Absolutely. There's really no excuse, especially at the moment. In my view, there is no excuse for doing other things when you're on a team meeting or whatever, because it's not like we've got tons and tons we need to be doing right now. Well, maybe I'm just speaking for myself there, but I think, yeah, it's really important to be respectful of other people's time and presence in that context. And when people speak, yeah, I like this. Marco has said, it'd be good to get the point of confidence where people speak in a virtual meeting without starting everything with, can you hear me? Yeah. So being confident, that's almost being confident in the technology. Does that sound about right? Yeah, and yes, Tim, you just made a really good point about childcare. Point taken. I just have dogs. Other people have children. I need to get better in my customers' shoes. Yeah, engage in different ways. Absolutely, Jennifer. I'm just going to copy and paste what you've written there, because I think that's a really good point. I'm laughing at something that Gavin has just commented, and I'm just going to post it so you can all enjoy that as well. It's a very good point. And Zach has just made a really great point of something to adopt, which is having your voice, having a voice and not being afraid to speak up and be heard. And Sue said dogs are great, absolutely. And also Helen has said just try stuff, absolutely, Helen. And that's exactly what we've been doing for the last few weeks, is just trying stuff. And people are incredibly forgiving and open. Oh, and also a nice one here for perhaps for team meetings is rotate the chair, so allow other people to speak. You know what's really nice about this as well, by the way, is so many of you are talking about things to adopt rather than things to avoid. I think it's got a really optimistic feel to it. So, look, thank you all so much for your contributions to that. And I'll be sending out these whiteboards that we've been typing on along with the recordings, etc. after the webinar. Now, I apologize. I desperately tried to keep to time, but this final slide will take me about 2 minutes to talk through. So apologies that we may go slightly over. This is just a summary, really. So as we said, you know, the first step of great virtual collaboration and delivery is to identify the tools that are at your disposal. And as Marco rightly pointed out, you can just pick up the phone as well. So I don't claim that the list of tools that I shared is by any means definitive or final, and of course it is quite sort of umbrella terms, so you know, get creative in thinking about what you can use. And then the second thing is, in terms of next steps, is give yourself some training and give your people some training. So our next webinar is going to be on it's going to be all about leading remote teams. So it's for people who lead teams, but it's also for people who are in teams, because I think the other thing that's happening in these incredibly uncertain and different times is leadership can come from anywhere, even more than it ever has before. So, you know, whether you're in a team, whether you're helping leaders to lead teams, whether you are a leader of a team, you know, feel free to join that webinar. And in terms of functionality, if you've got a smartphone, all you need to do is put your camera up to that QR code, and it'll then offer you the option of opening Safari. Certainly, if you have an iPhone, that works. I don't have Android, but if anyone can let me know if that does work, it'd be great, because I keep telling people it does, so hopefully it does. Okay, and then in terms of motivation, I think the key takeout there is make a plan. So if you're going to take it upon yourself to keep your team motivated, and again, whether you're a leader or not, you can take this on yourself. You know, you can be the convener of your team, whether you're part of a team or the leader of a team, whether you're a trainer or the head of a team. You can absolutely give this to people, because people are grateful for it at this time. So make a plan, get some ideas flowing, and then keep it up. And that's the key thing, to keep up that momentum. And then also think about gamification, things like recognition, things like giving a prize for the most engagement, or for the most shares in a week, and think about the quality as well. And I can just see someone has just said it works on Android, so that's brilliant. Thanks, Helen. And then finally, agree the behaviors. Now, agree is probably the key word here. The behaviors might change over time, but agree the way you're going to work together, and don't necessarily come at it and say this is how we're going to, but maybe have a conversation with your community, with your team, and work out the best ways of working. And I saw somebody talking about things like turning the mute button on and off. I'd say that comes into that category as well. It's about etiquette. And agree. Are we happy to have family interruptions? I think generally speaking, most people I've spoken to absolutely are, because it shows the human and the authenticity. But I think it's important that everyone agrees that, rather than just assuming it's going to be something that happens. So there you go. Tools. Build your tools. Give the training, build the motivation, and agree the behaviors. And I think if you do these 4 things, your virtual training will be vastly more improved and more successful. Your virtual working and collaboration with your team will be better and more effective. And you'll hopefully see a spike in productivity and an increase in productivity through that. And if you work directly with customers, you'll be able to keep your customers engaged, whether they're in a position to buy from you now or not. You want to be showing the sort of love that they will remember once all this is over. And that can apply, of course, to teams and trainers as well. So thank you, everybody. Oh, and finally, just to say that our biggest learning from all of this is from our experience of virtual delivery is, you know, ultimately the learning outcomes are the same, or the business outcomes are the same, but the way you deliver is different. So as they say in Thailand, it's same, but different. So thank you, everyone. And it's been a pleasure to spend this morning with you. As I mentioned, we've got a virtual delivery WhatsApp group. It's for anyone who is interested in this, anyone who's got tips to share or wants tips from others. So, you know, feel free to scan that QR code and join the group. It's completely open. And if you know of anyone else who'd like to be invited, then please let me know. But thank you all so much for your engagement. And I can see messages coming through now. So really grateful to